Welcome to the Why Did I Get Cancer podcast. I'm Deborah Herlax-Enos, a small-town girl turned TV nutritionist and healthy living expert. I design health programs for the average guy or gal, including those average guys named Metallica. On September 1st, 2020, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I asked every oncologist the same question, why did I get cancer? But none of my doctors had good answers for me. I wanted answers, and that's why I started this podcast. I want to help you to lower your cancer risk and provide self-care tips for those in the battle. I'm getting answers, and I want to share them with you. What did I take away from today's episode? That mold can be extremely toxic. That's something I just didn't know. Bridgit explained to me that there are some types of mold that are so toxic that they're actually used in chemical warfare. Listen to today's episode to learn more about mold and its impact on your health. Okay, so today's guest, I never thought I'd be talking to a mold expert.
I never thought I'd be one.
Bridgit, here we are.
Yeah, here we both are.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy how life just takes you in different directions. Bridgit Danner is a functional health coach and a specialist in mold detox. And the reason we're talking is I had cancer 2 years ago, and then a year ago, we had a flood in our office. I've never thought about mold before. And now, of course, I'm more careful with everything. So I'm concerned about mold in my office and going back in there. And can this harm me?
Yeah, it's a great question to ask. I mean, frankly, we're all going to come into contact with indoor water damage in our lifetimes, probably multiple times. It's just the way life works. And we're having more extreme weather now. And, sometimes we're just not maintaining buildings. So yeah, it's definitely a health hazard. It's not just a new health hazard. Like even in the Bible, there's references to like mold and fungus actually. So it's been around. So now with like modern construction, that gets a lot of the blame for how mold can kind of flourish, especially kind of quietly behind a wall. But yeah, it's been around for a while. I think a lot of people think mold in nature, like if you're walking through the woods, there's going to be moss and mold and decay, and that's all normal. But in a home environment, it's different. We're there a lot of the time, and you don't want a mold colony like growing behind the walls or under the floorboard because it's just creating like a stress on your body you don't know about. So, we can all handle a certain amount of stress, and there could be times where we have little bits of, high humidity or mold or something that our body is handling. But there can also be times where the load is just too high or our health history is such that it just tips us over the edge, right?
Yeah, I can see that happening. And so are you saying then that we're experiencing more molds today than maybe a couple hundred years ago?
It's a great question because I have some clients, say in Europe, who are in these older homes made of stone. They're probably 200-year-old or more, maybe 500 years old. I don't know. And there can be mold in there too. I think in England, they just call it dampness. They're like, oh, it's just a little dampness. Like, don't worry about it. So yeah, it's a great, are we experiencing more or not is a great question. I don't think we know for sure. I just think now, we're becoming more aware of it as people have chronic illness and maybe we aren't finding the answers. I mean, it is combined with other modern things too. There's a lot more compared to 200 years ago. There's definitely more other toxins in the environment that are brand new to us. And now our liver is, dealing with that. So let's say we lived in a farmhouse many, many years ago when we were probably outside a lot more. We probably were eating more of a real food diet. We weren't exposed to pollutants. So maybe if there was some mold in the house, like it could be handled. But now we have all these other factors plus potentially mold in the house. So yeah, it's a great question that I might not have a total answer for. But yeah, there is some historical context and like new modern context.
Mm-hmm. Well, you make a good point, Bridgit, because you're saying, maybe 200 years ago we had dampness or, that musty smell in our house, but we weren't inside that much. And now I think I've read that we spend 70% of our time indoors, where it used to be 60 or 70% outside. Now we're inside. So maybe our exposure is different.
I think it's different. I mean, I sometimes, I see some of my neighbors, like I barely see them, like besides getting, driving into their garage. Like there's some people I think are outdoors like literally 1% of the time.
Oh, gosh. And of course, that's where our best air is going to be, unless you want to invest in, some expensive or maybe not so expensive house plants to try to change your indoor air quality. But it sounds like the more we can get outside,
Definitely.
the better.
I mean, now outdoor air quality is a lot better than indoor air quality, which is saying something because there's still pollution out there, but it is better air quality. I mean, maybe not if you're like standing next to a highway, but generally speaking, it's better. And there's just so much healing in nature. So especially if you have a mold issue, I really encourage people to get outside, get out of the home. But yeah, just in general, as a practitioner, I am a big fan of getting outside. I used to live in the Pacific Northwest like you, and I had a dog, and I was still walking the dog in the rain. And sometimes the weather isn't always suitable, but you can still get out for a half an hour and do something.
You're right. You just have to gear up if you live here. And, you just have to, you're going to get wet. And that's just the way life is. Life is an outdoor game.
Yeah.
So, Bridgit, are there different types of mold? Some mold that, is not going to trigger some sort of an immune response or chronic disease. And then are there other molds? Tell us a little bit about maybe mold 101.
Yeah, I think there are thousands of types of molds, maybe hundreds of thousands. So really very many. When I was first learning about it, I really thought that only the toxic strains, which are about a dozen, make you sick. They make you the sickest. But as I've learned later from, I've networked with a lot of mold remediators, even non-toxic strains, when there's just a big load in your home, again, maybe also with like candida, there can be other like bacteria and, toxins like we talked about, that still can be bad for your health or cause allergies. So it's just like a matter of quantity and also types of mold. They're both like a factor.
Okay. So I'd mentioned when we first started that I had we had a flood in our office. And so now my husband and I are both working from the house. And, I'm wondering, when can we get back in there? Can you ever go back to a place where you've had maybe a water issue?
Yeah, well, if this was a sudden flood, in a way it's a little better, especially if you handled it quickly. So what tends to be the more tricky problem is when you have like a leak in the wall or the crawl space or whatever that you don't know about. So it's just going on and on. But if you have a sudden incident, always the best way, and we can talk actually about what you guys did or didn't do, within 48 hours, it needs to be fixed. So a call needs to be made like quickly, unless someone in the family is like super handy and a contractor. But, if not, if you don't have tools and stuff, wet drywall needs to be cut out, fans need to be run, like carpet needs to be pulled up. It depends on the extent, right? If you just have like a bathtub that little bit, whatever, like overflowed, like, certainly if it's tiny, you don't have to like rip up the floor. But if we're talking like a flood, which seems to be what you're describing, and, floorboards got saturated, drywall got saturated, carpet, furniture, this is a situation that needs handling fast. So if that's handled quickly and wherever was leaking, the source is handled, yeah, you could potentially be in there in a couple of weeks if you put everything back together, remove the damaged stuff, rebuild. It's just a matter, sometimes floods happen when people are out of town. So if something's sitting there 2 weeks wet, now you have a bigger problem. It depends where you live too. So you live in a rainy climate, it's more humid. Things aren't going to dry as well. I live in a dry climate now. Things dry well. I actually had a roof leak on and off this summer, and It came in like through the house, 2 layers of the house. I was like, oh my God. But because it rains here fast and then it dries fast, besides having some expense, I didn't have any mold damage, any mold. So yeah, different factors. Yeah, depending where you live.
Wow, that's amazing. So depending on where you live. Okay, so again, I'd mentioned, I never really thought that much about mold until we had this flood, but why do I need to be concerned? What can mold do to me?
Yeah, mold, especially if you never heard of this before, this is going to sound crazy, but mold is like an incredibly strong toxin. Some of the toxins from mold have been used as chemical warfare even. It's strong. It's a strong neurotoxin. I don't think mold means to be this really potent toxin. It's just sort of like this protective mechanism, it's putting out. It might not even be meaning to be toxic. It's just a noxious waste product kind of coming off of the mold. It's kind of can build this protective biofilm over the colony that's leaching out these gaseous toxins. And they are just incredibly potent. They can cross the blood-brain barrier. They can cross the cell barrier. They can travel in water. They can travel in fat. They can break down your gut. They can inflame your brain. They can degenerate your brain. They can do anything they want in your body. Yeah, they are very strong. I mean, there are people who have cancer, who have paralysis, in a wheelchair, and they find out it's coming from mold. And it just doesn't get a lot of press for its ability to make people potentially really, really sick. It depends on your body and the mold, and, there's different factors. But I got pretty darn sick myself, so I know it's true. And now I help other people with this. And it's just such a strong toxin that if you continue to live and be around it, everything else you do for your health is basically not going to work. You can change your diet, you can go to bed on time, you can meditate. If you're still living in mold and it's, already affecting you, it's going to keep getting worse. It just is. So it's worth knowing about. Just have awareness that it's possible.
I think I might be mildly freaking out right now, Bridgit. But so it sounds like what you're saying, mold is super strong. Not all of them, but the ones that are really considered toxic are very strong in your body. And it sounds like it doesn't just work its way out. You have to do something to try to get it out of your body. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, some can be removed. Some will be removed. Well, so there's a lot of factors considered. Let's say you're still in the moldy home, whether you know it or not. You might be getting rid of some, but you're still putting it in. And it keeps going and going, right? So you're never going to get rid of it. But let's say you move out. And I've seen this with clients too. Some of them move out, especially the ones maybe this happened a few years ago. They didn't know much about mold. They move out and they're still not feeling good a few years later. And we test and the mold is still in them, the mold toxins. So why is that? Because one reason is our body recycles bile. So bile holds toxins. It's supposed to be pooped out, like fat-soluble toxins, but it's possible they can be recycled back in. So that's one way. Or if you're not pooping very often, they can be recycled back in because you're constipated. If you're, maybe not drinking enough water, you're not supporting your liver, or, you don't get enough nutrients for your liver. And then there's some factors about immunity that some people, like 25% of people, their immune system cannot tag the mycotoxin and make antibodies against it. So that gets talked about a lot.
And mycotoxin is mold, correct?
Yeah, it's a toxin that comes off mold. Yeah. So now we're able to test that in a urine test, and there's some blood tests too. And so, yeah, why would it still be in us? It's sometimes the body is just not recognizing it, moving it out, those are, in short, the reasons why it could still be lingering.
Okay. Interesting. So your body wants to move it out, but it may not have the ability. Is that maybe due to, I'll just say about me, maybe because I had cancer a year and a half ago and my, body's not healed? I mean, are there reasons why we can't move it out?
Yeah, I think there are lots of different reasons depending on the person. And I'd love to hear more your perspective from the cancer side, because that's not as much my specialty with clients. But yeah, some people like genetically don't have strong detox, like they don't recycle glutathione as well, which is a really important antioxidant. Or if you've been through cancer and maybe cancer treatment, potentially like very toxic cancer treatment, probably your antioxidant status has taken a hit. So, you might not be processing out, other toxins as well. There's like only so much the body can handle. And some people are constipated. Some people have, a weaker immune system from age or just being in mold so long that the body, even I moved from the Northwest to Arizona really to heal. And it still took a while, it was like, I don't know how you feel in your journey right now, Deborah, but if nothing in the body is overnight, it takes time to, even if you feel better than you did a year ago, it may not be where you want to be quite yet.
Right. No, it's been a slow process and still trying to get my strength back. And it's a much slower process than I would like it to be.
Yeah, I can relate.
It is what it is. And right. And I know that, given the right tools, your body can really heal itself.
Yes. Yeah. Some people ask me the question, so when I started to specialize in detox, they're like, well, doesn't the body detox itself? And I'm like, well, yes, but you can support that or you can inhibit that. You can go either way. If you want to smoke a pack of cigarettes a day and eat a McDonald's, I can guarantee you're inhibiting your detox. But if you get fresh air, you exercise, you eat real food, you have good relationships, I also guarantee you are benefiting your detox processes. So, it's sort of the body's the tool, and how well do we support that tool?
Have you ever cooked with bison? I absolutely love the taste of bison, and basically it's a replacement for ground beef. Not that I have anything against ground beef. One of the things I love about bison is it's got higher levels of B12, it's got higher levels of zinc, iron, selenium. It's really nutrient dense, and it actually has more omega-3 fatty acids than beef. I'm always trying to get more omega-3 fatty acids. I also love that it contains conjugated linoleic acid. Translation, what that means is it's got some anti-inflammatory properties. And I'm all about trying to lower my levels of inflammation. I'm always telling my friends and family to use more bison. You cook it up just like you do ground beef. Now, it does have lower fat levels, so you're going to have to maybe just not cook it as long and really keep a better eye on it if you're making burgers. But in my efforts to try to get more people to eat bison, I reached out to my friends at ButcherBox and I asked them, can you give my community free bison for a year? And I got to tell you, they did think about it for a couple of days, but then they came back and they said, we will do this for you. They're not doing it for anybody else. So go to butcherbox.com/Enos, then use the code Enos. I know that is a lot of the word Enos. And you're going to get free bison for a year and $20 off of your first box. I honestly don't know how long this offer is going to last. So I really encourage you to sign up today, start using bison. It tastes exactly like beef, but I honestly think it's got a little bit of a stronger flavor. And so I love using it in tacos. I make burgers with it. I crumble it over salads. So again, go to butcherbox.com/Enos. Use the code Enos for $20 off your first box and free bison for a year. It's going to be an awesome summer. And it seems like, so many of us are trying. you know, but there's a lot of boxes to check. You know, you said sleeping well, relationships. You mentioned pooping. Is that one of our number one ways to detox mycotoxin, which is the mold toxin? Is that one of the best ways to get it out?
Yeah, and I mentioned that one kind of the most because it is constipation is a common problem in America.
It really is.
Yeah, so most of us are urinating and breathing and
Hopefully,
maybe sweating.
Yes.
But pooping, it's like, well, how often are you pooping? Really, it should be, even more than once a day. Like if you have a dog or a cat, they go more than once a day. And so some adults, though, have gotten used to going every 3 days. It's not normal. And things are going to circle back in if you're not pooping them out. So
honestly, it is the truth. I remember years ago, I had a client and she said she pooped once a week and that was with medication.
Oh, gosh. Oh.
I know. And so I hope she got help. It's been a long time since I've seen her because, 7 or 8 years ago, we didn't really think that much about it. I mean, we knew we needed to poop more often, but it's such a strong detox pathways. I mean, it's a waste product. We're trying to get waste out of our body. And that does include, old cells and mycotoxins and junk. Get the junk out.
Yeah, most of us don't need to have as much fiber in our diets anymore, or we're not active as much anymore. So, yeah, really paying attention, or if you're a parent even, are your kids having bowel movements? Just paying attention to that. And there's so many ways to improve bowel motility. We're all a little different on what's going to work for us. But, I hate to hear people are just kind of give up and they say, well, that's how I am. Because it definitely can be improved.
Yeah, it seems like it's very common to just say, oh, no, I've always been like this. Maybe that's not the way God intended you to be, I mean, there are things that we can do. You were pooping more than once every 7 days. I can guarantee it. Right. So are we all born with good detox pathways? And then do we, through our habits, kind of mess those up?
Some people are born with less ability to detox. They're probably the ones who are kind of health sensitive, you could almost say, they get overwhelmed by smells in the grocery store or, get sick easily, potentially you could see things like this, kind of sensitives. And then frankly now, we can be exposed to toxins in utero in early life, and that can affect our ability to process things. So some of it's genetics, some of it's early life epigenetics, and then early life, exposures to toxins can affect us. And certainly with age, we can, our immune system can be less strong. Our antioxidant network can be less strong, but there's always ways to boost it. So, I think it's relative.
Do you have some recommendations, just for somebody who maybe is feeling overwhelmed because they're listening to this podcast and they realize, okay, I don't poop every day and, I don't like to exercise, so I'm not sweating. And it sounds like what you're saying is we really could bear to take a look at our detox pathways, but also let's not make it too confusing. So a couple of tips for us?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have a book about mold, and first I have like a checklist of 10 things to check before we move into detox. So let's approach it kind of the same way. So some of those things are maybe things that are more obvious, like drinking water, which you are doing right now. Eating, which is great.
Right now?
Eating real food, we're like, okay, yeah. But getting a good night's sleep, pooping, not having relationship stress in your life, having a support network, being like inspired about something in your life that you're working towards. We all have our blind spots. So yeah, like you said, some people might just not like exercising, or they have to kind of push themselves to exercise. So I think we can all go through like a checklist okay, what are some areas that maybe I could be just in a basic sense, like getting more hours of sleep, doing things for self-care and rest and, fun. I remember when I was a young mom, it's like, how much time did I have to just have fun and like do things for myself and be with other women? Like none.
Not too much.
Yeah. So it changes in different, times of your life. But I think we can all like think about one or two things like, okay, I could be cooking more. I could be seeing friends more, whatever it is. And then you can move into detox, because if you skip some of those basics, it's probably similar for cancer, I would assume. Like, we can get all fancy with, certain supplements or whatever. But like, if meanwhile you're in a horrible relationship at home and that's just beating you down every day, how is a fancy supplement really gonna move the needle? So,
yeah. Well said. Yeah, I think sometimes we just, human nature, right? We look for the easy. And sometimes the easiest way to go is, okay, I'm going to increase my vitamin C. And it's winter, I'm going to increase my vitamin D. And we spend an insane amount of money on supplements, but yet we watch the news until midnight.
True.
And, then we are churning and burning all night and not getting a good night's sleep and maybe sleeping with our cell phone, and it's not on airplane
That's
mode.
a great point. Yeah. And we can all be tempted to do that in modern culture. But I like that you mentioned those two supplements are actually very affordable. So if you are going to take supplements, those are a great place to start. Fantastic.
Those are a great place to start, yes. And hard to get enough vitamin D when you live in the Pacific Northwest in the winter.
Yeah. Those two. I mean, that's another thing I harp on. Actually, in my top 10 is take your foundational supplements, because I see clients come to me and they're like taking all this expensive, fancy, stuff. And I'm like, where are just your B vitamins? Oh, I don't take those. They're so cheap. They're very important for your liver, like very important for your hormones. So before you get fancy, just use, like Deborah mentioned, vitamin C, vitamin D. Like, your body needs all those basic ingredients. That's how we've identified them as being important. So take those first.
Right. And I think too, I had a client one time, and I was giving a speech, and she came up to me after and she said, hey, I wanted to talk to you about my supplements. And I said, oh, great. Ask me anything. And she said, well, I'm taking 38 supplements a day. And I said, oh my gosh. Wow, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize you were so ill. And she said, oh, I'm not ill. I just watch Dr. Oz every day. And I said, okay, I know he's into supplements. And, it's great to take supplements. I'm not poo-pooing supplements, but I'm just saying, if you're going to take it, know why you're taking it. Get some good advice. Hire an expert. A doctor's probably not going to be your best expert when it comes to supplements, because they don't get a lot of training. But, also vitamins taken, I'll say, out of context, meaning taking high doses of one when it's not mixed, how it's mixed in nature, isn't always the best long-term plan.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I get that too with clients coming in and a super long list. And I'll be like, why are you taking this one? Why are you taking that one? They're like, oh, I've been taking that one so long, I can't even remember. I'm like, what?
Right. But you just take it,
like,
and you don't know why you're putting it in your mouth.
Like, what is the most important, on this list?
Right. And there are some that you can't, it's hard to get. I won't say you can't, because I think you can make some real efforts, but it is hard to get enough, let's say magnesium from food.
100%. Yeah, that's always one I harp on.
Right, because our soil has changed, and, the plants are not getting as much magnesium in the soil. And so they're magnesium deficient. And then the average American, is getting 2 vegetables a day?
Oh, really?
And one of them, I think, is considered as a French fry, and that's...
It's probably true.
Bridgit, we're not pooping.
It's probably true. Yeah, I know. If you get like no fiber in your diet, it's like,
right.
I don't know. Apparently the carnivore diet can keep you pooping, but I don't totally know if that's a fact.
I haven't jumped on that bandwagon yet, but we'll see. I'm open to anything, but I also, love old-fashioned, ancestral living eating what my grandparents and great-grandparents ate and keeping it really simple.
Yeah. Yeah. As much as like maybe we can survive on just like liver and meat and fat, for the most part, our ancestors were foraging and they did eat a lot of plants, unless they were like Eskimos. So yeah, I think there's a lot of benefit. And I'm way into antioxidants, and a lot of those are the colorful fruits and vegetables. So just as simple as saying like, maybe if you're getting 2 vegetables, increase it to 5 and try to get them to be 5 different colors. That's a fantastic thing to do. Also simple.
Yeah, really. And that's a really great and simple start, because I think we've talked about a lot today, and I think mold can be a little bit overwhelming. But if I really want to move forward with my life and not get cancer again or any other chronic disease, do I need to really take a look at potential mold issues in my life?
Yeah, I think it's important for everyone to be aware of mold as a toxin and then the other toxins too, right? So I'm sure you're aware of it, Deborah, but if you think of like the most Americans, I don't think there's a great awareness that like fragrance is toxic to you, or even things you wouldn't even think about, like your new IKEA coffee table is toxic to you. It's full of glues and processing agents. So, just being aware that your home environment affects your health. And you see like on Instagram, everyone talking about like diet and exercise and like mindset. It's like, what about your home? You're in that all the time. So you have to think about air quality. Where like basically that's a big part, is just air quality, water quality. So that could be from mold. And again, I say in your lifetime, everyone's going to encounter some kind of humidity issue, water damage issue where they live. So just being more aware that these kind of issues can affect your health. They kind of can't be just ignored and painted over. They are inconvenient. They can be expensive, but it again, like nothing else is really going to keep you healthy if you have a big old mold colony in your office, getting you sick. So it's just worth knowing about. We have some free resources on my website, like a little getting started with mold guide. And I just encourage people, like, just be where you are. Like, I have clients, far in the process of healing. Great. And then I have clients, or maybe someone listening, who's just like, I'm wondering about this for myself and something that happened in my own home or my own health. Okay, just learn a little bit more right now. That's all you have to do. Learn a little bit more. If you decide to move forward, next step might be doing some kind of testing, but just take the step right where you are.
Okay, because I think I'm new to the mold world, and if I hadn't had that flood, I wouldn't be talking to you. But it scared me because every time I go in my office, I smell it, and then I get a little bit of a headache, and I have some respiratory stuff, and
no.
So I know it's dangerous, and other people are experiencing this too. I mean, you walk in, maybe you rent an Airbnb and it smells musty, and then you have a headache for 3 days, or we all have things that hit our bodies. And then maybe we question, I wonder why my body reacted like that. So it sounds like what you're saying is take a look at it. Because if we're trying to figure out the root cause of, why does my husband always get sinus infections? Well, we need to take a look at that, because your body shouldn't always be getting something.
No, that's a good point. And I think we want to focus too on chronic exposure. Like, say, this is a good example of an Airbnb, sometimes you can just open the windows, or you're out a lot and you can deal with it. If it's really bad, you might move out, you might cancel. But overall, that's a short-term experience. Whereas your office or your home, your workplace, your car, your RV, these are long-term exposures. These are chronic exposures, and that's going to affect you a lot more. So as much it is an issue with traveling, and mold or toxin exposure is more of an issue in the home. And again, it's easier to think about the one that's temporary than the one that's in your own, den. but you have to think about the one that you're exposed to more.
Okay. That's a great distinction, because who hasn't walked into a room or visited a friend and you think, oh my gosh, it smells so musty in here. But it's temporary. You're there for an hour or whatever. But what you're saying is the chronic exposure. So in your house or your RV, I remember my parents had an RV and it had a little water leak in it. And now I'm thinking, okay, if you're going to be sleeping in there, you really need to take a look at this.
Yeah, I think that was the first mold exposure we found, was a little RV we bought. It was like all rotted up. And then later we discovered our house. So yeah, I mean, I've seen it in like houseboats. I've heard about it all sorts of places now. And yeah, it sucks because it's expensive and it's inconvenient. Right. But it is what it is. I have one chapter in my book just all about the mechanisms of mold and like how it affects different body systems and all the research. And to me, like that's like the smoking gun. It's like, we know this stuff is very dangerous. So you just have to take the steps needed if you're having symptoms, especially, right? If you're like, I feel great in my moldy RV. Okay, well, I'm not going to tell you what to do. Right. I mean, you might eventually get cancer, but if you have symptoms, that's mostly who I'm focusing on. It's like if you're like, I'm always having sinus infections, my brain isn't working like it used to, I gained 50 pounds, I don't know why. All these things could be mold. So
interesting. And so you mentioned some resources. I'd love to tag those in the show notes. And, for anybody who's gathering information, they're at that stage of, oh my gosh, I have chronic this or I have chronic that. Could it be some mold exposure? And so it sounds like we can tag you in that and get more information out.
Yeah, that'd be great. So my main website is just my name, BridgitDanner.com. And we have like a freebies tab with some free ebooks. We have a pretty extensive blog. I have several YouTube interviews about mold. So, whatever route you want to take, you can find something. And then I have a book that came out on Amazon this year, and it's an audio book too. So it's very easy. And you can just search, it's called The Ultimate Toxic Mold Recovery Guide. So you can just search that and we can give you the link as well. So if you're like a little further in the step, I think it's a great book to have if you're actually going through the journey, because you're going to be wondering, like, do I have to throw this thing out? Do I have to do this? Do I have to do that? And I just guide you, through that.
And again, amazing that you just fell into this. You fell into it because you were sick. And, honestly, we make the best teachers, don't we? Because we teach because we've been through it. And just thank you so much for sharing your journey and your wisdom with everyone today.
Oh, likewise. I love to speak about it. And I hope that you figure it out with your office. Sounds like
Thank you so much. I'll keep you posted.
I know.
It's not looking good.
Oh, no. Just burn it down. That might be the answer.
Gosh, crazy times. But, the world's a little crazy these days, isn't it?
That's true, right? I know. It kind of makes you feel like, okay, my life is crazy, but so is everybody else.
Yeah. So we're all in good company.
Totally. Well, thank you, Deborah. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks, Bridgit, for coming on Why Did I Get Cancer? So interesting. Thank you for joining me today on the Why Did I Get Cancer podcast. I've got my shopping guide for all of my cancer self-care items in the show notes, along with information about today's guest and our show sponsors. And don't forget to subscribe to my podcast so you never miss an episode. Keep in mind, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a gal that got diagnosed with cancer and wanted answers. If you need medical advice, please be sure to consult with a medical professional. And thank you for listening.